Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Adefemi, good morning. Oh, you are in Greece.
Crete.
Good morning, Dr. Ruben.
Good morning.
Yes, we are in Greece today. We're on the island of Crete. And as you can see, it is beautiful weather outside. The waters are so blue, the grass is so green, the flowers are so colorful. Good morning to you, Ruben. Dr. Ruben, of course. Good morning to you, Rufai, and good morning to you, Vimbai.
Good morning
Hope
from
you're
Euro
doing well.
Summer. Ooh, enjoyment.
Summer, holiday. Crete.
What can we say?
That's
What can we say?
cream. Crete is cream.
Crete,
Yeah.
Crete is cream.
Yes.
But first, let me tell you what's happening around the world. Let's begin in the Middle East, where over the course of the weekend, you have international organizations, including Oxfam, who've come out to say that despite the fact that Israel has started to open some corridors allowing aid, it is nowhere near enough. And they are calling it really a grotesque blocking of aid into the civilians in Gaza who need it the most. Now, over the course of the weekend, you had the likes of Jordan being able to deliver aid via airdrops, which can be quite dangerous, deadly even, because sometimes there is no control over where these airdrops fall. Sometimes they fall into the sea. People would have to scramble into the waters and get them. There's also the risk of drowning, and then there's also the legitimate risk of these packages actually striking people as they make landfall and resulting in fatalities. So you've got the airdrops that's coming in, and then via road, you've got Egypt sending aid via road. You've got the United Nations also sending aid via land avenues. But essentially, this is just nowhere near as much as what is needed. So essentially, if you're looking at the numbers here, it's very eye-opening, because if we are saying that 160 drop flights were to happen, which is not what happened over the course of the weekend, but essentially you would need 160 airdrop flights they would be needed to provide just one meal for each person living in Gaza. So when you're looking at the actual numberings of aid that had been dropped over the weekend, it pales in comparison to the need on the ground. This is nowhere near enough. That's why you've got the likes of Oxfam coming out and basically calling for a full border opening across air, across land, so that this need for humanitarian aid can be addressed to the people who need it the most. You also have, to this effect, the IRC, who have said essentially that they're calling this a grotesque distraction. That's what they are calling Israel's actions, essentially saying that, okay, we are allowing you to drop aid here and there. They're calling it a distraction because it's nowhere near as much aid as is needed there. So again, a lot of international organizations are not very happy. There's a lot of pressure piling on Israel to do something, especially since over the course of last week and the days before then, there's been increased reporting on the famine on the ground, the hunger, the debilitating pictures of children, women, men just starving, falling down in the streets. So you can understand why Israel have come out to say that they're allowing more aid in, but as we've heard from the international agencies, it's just nowhere near enough. Let's move on now to the African continent. Firstly, let's take a look at what is happening in Cameroon. So over the course of the week, we had been talking, actually before we get to Cameroon, we'll finish on Cameroon, let's go to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where there's been, unfortunately, again over the weekend, a very serious attack on a Catholic church in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo. At least 38 people were killed, 15 more injured following an attack on that church. Now this church took place in the city of Komanda, which, as I said, is in this significant region in the east of DRC, which has been fighting this war not only within the country but also over the course of its border with Rwanda. And we're seeing that this has taken a different lease, where you had the attacks carried out by suspected members of the Allied Democratic Forces, which it's believed that they have some form of affinity with Islamic State, ISIS, ISIL. And so this looks at a religious tangent on what we're seeing already happening with the conflict in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo. So a lot of people clearly affected by that. These people who were attacked at the church, it is believed that the attackers were wielding machetes, also had firearms, people were shot, people were hurt, and of course there's destruction to the Catholic Church church there. And then just finally, if we just come back to Cameroon, and we do know that they are heading towards a presidential election. We know that President Paul Biya has already said that he wants to run yet again. This time, perhaps it looks as though his route to re-election has been made that much easier, especially since we know that the Cameroon's main opposition leader, Maurice Kamto, he's been excluded actually from participating in this October 12 presidential election. Now Kamto, he actually came second back in 2018, so he is quite a significant player in the Cameroonian opposition, and that could be a reason why 92-year-old Paul Biya would be able to reap the benefits of his exclusion. A list of candidates was released yesterday. Unfortunately, Maurice Kamto was not on it, and to him and his supporters, they say that this is just another example of them being disenfranchised in order for Paul Biya to stay on as president of Cameroon. It's another example, as Dr. Rubin calls it, of African sit-tightism. Unfortunately, yet again, we're seeing that example. So I'd love to hear your thoughts before we move on to the papers.
Right. Wonderful, insightful stories there. Real quickly, like I said last week, Femi, if you close your eyes and you take a test and they tell you something happening in an African country, you can be very sure that it's going to be the same across board. What is happening in Cameroon? Albeit at the age of 92, a man that cannot, that farted in a room that didn't know people were there. I mean, he literally farted in the room. He didn't know people were there.
Is it fair?
He had lost awareness of where he was. And this man wants to be president again at the age of 92. Now, the major opposition that might give him a problem, what did they do? They now planted an opposition within the opposition fold in such a way that the political party the opposition is coming from now presents two candidates. Pretty much how they do here, where you have two different factions in Nigeria. And now they're not saying on the basis of that, he cannot run, that there's going to be direct disqualification. They say he's got some days to challenge it. Exactly, Femi, the same thing. I was in Abidjan when it happened. Exactly the same thing they did to Tijam. They frustrated his move, ensured that Tijam can't get on the ballot because Alassane Ouattara, at the age of over 80, still wants to sit tight and be president of Abidjan, of Côte d'Ivoire. So it's the same score all over Africa. And that's why, because of this lack of leadership, there's a leadership deficit. That's why you are seeing increased conflicts. That's why you are seeing groups like the ADF out of Congo attacking people, aligning with Islamic State, trying as much as possible to hurt people. And that's why you are seeing the imbalance across the African continent. As regards Israel, François de la Rochefoucauld famously said, hypocrisy is the homage vice pays to virtue. Virtuous people, people that have vices, evil vices, also want to feel like they are virtuous. That's what they are now trying to do with throwing aid down. After people are dying from starvation, Israel set up a kangaroo committee called Gaza Foundation, or whatever they call it, GHF. They are now throwing aid down. When people are already dying, they are now leaving entrance for aid to go through after people are dying. Why didn't Israel do this from day one by stopping the war? Today, there's over 60,000 people that have died. With their GHF scam that Israel is doing, over 1,000 people have died trying to get the aid from Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. So who are they deceiving?
All right, I'll focus on Congo, which, has been hugely publicized because of the peace deal that Donald Trump's administration was able to strike in the Kivu region. That's when he started his repertoire about possibly wanting to be nominated or feeling like he's worthy of a Nobel Peace Prize. And well, this is where we find ourselves. And if you remember when the peace deal was struck, we were all extremely skeptical about it because we said this doesn't address the key issues in the region. Well, now next door to North Kivu and South Kivu, you have Ituri province, which is headed by a military governor, Lieutenant Colonel Nkashama, I believe his name is. And you now have this. Now, as much as this is making headlines, this killing that has been done is making headlines, this has been the case in the Ituri region for the past few years. This has been their reality. I don't want to call the ADF by that name. I want to call them by the name they really answer to, which is ISIS DRC. So we have this radicalization extremists that are said to be on an agenda of ethnic cleansing. Who are the people we have in that region? We have people called the Hema tribe. Hema originate from neighboring Uganda. But however, due to things we continue to discuss here, borders that have been set and so forth, they found themselves settled in Ituri province. Now, the ADF or ISIS DRC is a group that actually was expelled from Uganda by Yoweri Museveni some years ago. And now, for me, what I find concerning is that they're also associated with ISIS Mozambique, who are the guys who are perpetuating all types of terrorist activities in Cabo Delgado in Mozambique. What does this show you? It shows that there is a concerning rise in this extremist behavior, terrorist activity going on the African continent, and that unfortunately our solution and our sustainable peace deals cannot come from Qatar or Washington, D.C., that all of these things can only be resolved domestically through African solutions because we have a serious problem with ethnic clashes and the manner in which these terrible terrorist groups are now taking advantage of this animosity between ethnic groups to destabilize and to commit such horrific acts.
Okay, Cameroon. Only 13 of the 83 candidates who filed for interest in the October 12 election were cleared. And the leading ones among them are allies also of Paul Biya. Now, Maurice Kamto, who was the runner-up with 14% in the 2018 election, with Paul Biya awarding himself 17% in that election. At that time, Kamto ran under the banner of the Cameroonian Renaissance Movement, the CRM. But ELECAM, which is the election body, now says this time around he cannot run because the CRM does not have a representative at the local party. So he joined the Manidem party. Now the Manidem party has crisis of internal democracy. So first point, it's about crisis of internal democracy in opposition parties, in parties in Africa. The inchoate nature of many of our political parties. They have two candidates. They put in two candidates for the October 12 election. So ELECAM has capitalized on that. The second thing, of course, which is the bigger issue, is Paul Biya's Sithitism. He's the oldest ruling president in Africa. He's only second to only Obiango, Mbasongo of Equatorial Guinea. So you have these African leaders in Cameroon, in Equatorial Guinea, in Rwanda, trying to rule for life. That's the challenge that we deal with. But the fear that we have is that there will be no outbreak of violence in Cameroon in case the opposition supporters decide to go onto the streets. As for Israel, now it's very clear that since May 27, when Israel introduced the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the GHR, backed only by the US, it didn't have the support of the charity organizations or humanitarian organizations because nobody trusted them. You are the one fighting in the Gaza Strip, fighting the Hamas. You are the one also who wants to control access to food, access to telecommunication, access to everything. And Israel has been violating international law on the basis of which the International Criminal Court has charged Israel for genocide, on the basis of which the ICJ has issued warrant of arrest against Benjamin Netanyahu and his former chief of defense staff, Yoav Gallant. But what has the international community done about that? It's instructive that even now with the resumption of deadly drops of aid, Bushra Khalidi, who is a policy lead for Oxfam in the occupied Palestinian territory, is the one saying, no, this is not good enough. There are not enough trucks. The airdrops are deadly. You have to allow free unhindered access. Then there should also be a ceasefire, and there should be emphasis truly on humanitarian assistance. But who is going to talk to Israel? That's the problem. Now, very quickly in DR Congo. Now, many will remember June 5, 2022, in a place called Owo in Nigeria, Ondo State, we had this influence of the Islamic State when a Catholic church was attacked. So what has happened in the northeastern part of DRC is also about the Allied Democratic Forces, ADF, attacking a church during Mass very early in the morning, and death toll is said to be over 40, and it could even be more. But don't think it is religion. That northeastern province, the Ituri province, is also very rich in mineral resources. So just as you have the M23, the March 23 movement, also fighting over mineral resources, you find also that the DRC is also troubled in that particular region. So terrorism, insurgency, these are global issues. But it's unfortunate that the Democratic Republic of Congo is so blessed, and yet it is so troubled.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you all for your wonderful submissions on the World Brief this morning. Let's go to newspapers. As ever, we begin with the front page of This Day. And if we look at This Day, it does lead with the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria telling the federal government that rebased nominal GDP expansion of 18.3%, that it's not evidence of economic progress. That's what they're saying. Meanwhile, also on the front page of This Day, it also reports that the founder of Dangote Group, Alhaji Aliko Dangote, says that Tinubu is a listening president whose policies are reviving the private sector. Now let's just stay on that, because speaking of Dangote, the Punch this morning reports on a fuel war brewing as Dangote presses Tinubu to ban imports as part of this Nigeria First policy. But as expected, you've got the likes of Ipman and Petron kicking against that. Let's move on. Again, though, in the same vein to The Guardian this morning. The Guardian leads with refineries and Ajaokuta still failing revival efforts despite 6.5 trillion naira being spent on it over the course of 10 years. Now, the New Telegraph this morning says that President Tinubu, Peter Obi, Senator Rabiu Kwankwaso, and others are gearing up for an epic battle in 2027 ahead, of course, that presidential election. But before the election 2027, right here, right now, you have the Daily Sun reporting on the death toll of at least 13 people. 13 bodies were recovered and 26 people were rescued following a boating accident in Niger State. And the Daily Trust has at least 5 dead and 50 injured in the flooding over in Adamawa State. Now, there's also news, shocking news, of a python and other animals that escaped from the home of the former Accountant General, his actual residence, Ahmed Idris. Apparently, those animals which were found or escaped from his home have now been evacuated to the zoo over in Kano. And before we go, the Vanguard does lead with the miracle of Rabat. That's as Nigeria's Super Falcons, the national women's football side, are for the 10th time champions of Africa after coming from a 2-goal deficit against host Morocco to win 3-2. What a match that was. The president will be hosting the champions, our champions, today in Abuja, and I know that Aaron has all of the details. Ebby's done a great job recording and reporting live from Morocco there. And still on the theme of women's football and victory, on the front page of the UK's Mirror this morning, we have England's Eurojoy as the Lion Yeses have retained their title as champions of Europe in a historic penalty shootout against World Cup winners Spain. Those are your papers from around the world.
Thank you so much for that, Adefemi. A bittersweet morning as we celebrate with the Super Falcons. We commiserate with those in Niger State, Adamawa State on those tragic incidents. Thank you so much, Adefemi.